Thanks for joining us. I'm Randall Bennett. AMD has been on the ropes, at least in the tech community. We've seen them try to compete with rival Intel. And up to now, Intel's kind of been a little bit ahead, always, a little bit more expensive as well. But now with a new set of processors that was announced in January and some speed bumps that were announced this week, people are starting to look at AMD and saying, maybe they're back. Let's talk to an expert who knows what he's talking about with processors and computer hardware. We are joined by the illustrious Anand Shimpi from Anandtech. Anand, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, sir.
So let's talk about this. Briefly before we started, we were talking about how the latest update this week is actually an update to a line of processors that were announced in January. Maybe try to break down exactly, what is this new line of processors? How is it being received? And for consumers, is it a good buy and is it a good deal?
Okay. So this actually all dates back to, I'd say about a couple years ago when AMD first introduced its Phenom processor. So Phenom was this whole new quad-core design that AMD did, and honestly, it wasn't that good in its first incarnation. Over the coming months after its launch, AMD kind of updated it, made it a little faster, and basically by the end of its life, it was okay. It wasn't really great, and the Intel alternatives, the Core 2 Quad, it just ended up being a better option. Mm-hmm. Now, in January of this year, AMD kind of introduced an updated version of Phenom, aptly named Phenom II. And what this did was, one of the biggest shortcomings to the original Phenom is it simply didn't have enough cache, right? So it was a truly native quad-core design, and in doing that, AMD kind of had to make a few sacrifices, right? It was built on a larger manufacturing process, and they had to kind of cut down on some of the cache that they had on there. Yeah. Now, Phenom 2, it's a 45 nanometer chip, just like the latest Intel processors, and because of that, they're able to put a lot more cache. So your kind of ratio of compute to cache is a lot more balanced.
Therefore, it's a lot speedy. Is that kind of what happens because the cache is raised up?
Yeah, I mean, it basically boils down to that, right? Like, if you look at the original Phenom, it wasn't really balanced, right? So, like, it was you had a lot of cores and a lot of compute on that chip, but you didn't have much cache. And, it's like kind of having, like, a car with a lot of horsepower, but not enough braking power, not enough stopping power.
Yeah.
So Phenom 2 ended up being a lot more balanced. And architecturally, if you look at it from a compute to cache ratio, much more like Intel's Nehalem than, I guess, the original Phenom was. And we already know Nehalem is a very good architecture, so it makes sense to kind of follow in that direction.
So with this, it sounds like AMD has moved a little bit more, they're more competitive, and at least in the enthusiast market, they're seeing them as, like you say, it's kind of balanced. It seems like they're not just trying to have as many cores or as many megahertz as possible. Does this kind of revitalize AMD, this new processor, and the subsequent updates?
Yes. So January marked the first month where we could actually consciously recommend an AMD chip and say, look, this is actually not bad. And with the 955, which just launched yesterday, that chip is actually price performance. It's better than the equivalent Intel.
Wow, so it really does sound like a sea change. Like for the first time in years, you are comfortable in saying this AMD chip is better than an Intel chip.
Yes, at that price point, right? So that's the issue. AMD competes at much lower price points than for example, Nehalem.
Yeah.
Right. So the 955 AMD is kind of top of the line Phenom 2X4. That's still not even faster than the entry level Nehalem.
Yeah, but at the price point, it's kind of like, for what you're going to be paying, you'll get a better chip, which is, I guess for years hasn't been the case. So AMD is kind of back in that lower brand, but
AMD basically has delivered a processor which is equal to, if not greater than, the equivalent Intel Core 2 Quad at a price point.
Great.
Now, Intel has the flexibility, if it would like, to kind of drop prices and kind of restore the balance in Intel's favor, but that's up to them.
Yeah, exactly.
From an economic standpoint, AMD's chip, so the Phenom 2 955 that's competing with the Core 2s that are kind of priced similarly, the Phenom 2 ends up being a bigger chip. So it actually costs AMD more to compete at lower price points than it does Intel, which in the long run isn't a good strategy for them. But for the consumer, hey, it's great. You get a great chip for a very, very competitive price.
Maybe they're trading in some profit margins for some brand recognition and trying to get at least some sales up. I mean, let's be honest. Like, it's been a while since AMD's had a lot going on, so this is definitely interesting.
Yeah.
And now we're out of time.
No, you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, definitely. We're out of time, so we have to leave it there. Again, it's Anand Shimpi from Anandtech.com, one of the most respected hardware publications. We're really glad you came on the show. That does it for today's show. I'm Randall Bennett. And catch us on iTunes. We're on YouTube. We're everywhere. Find us. See you later.